Imagine if a game could summon something invisible, not just a scary story on Halloween night, but a real ritual that leaves traces and victims. They just wanted to have fun, light candles, tell horror stories, then go home laughing. But that night, no one laughed. One by one, they disappeared. One by one, they began to hear voices coming from behind the walls. And when the last candle was blown out, the door that should have remained closed forever opened. This isn't just a story. It's a warning. Because once you start hearing them, they start hearing you too. The scratch of a match echoed in the silent room. One by one, tiny flames flickered to life. Circling the center, an old wooden floor in a suburban Illinois house, abandoned for years and thick with dust. The air was damp, heavy, as if the house had been holding its breath, waiting for someone to notice it again. For teenagers sat cross-legged in the circle. Ryan, the oldest, held a small notebook and a box of matches. Beside him, Emily clutched a leather-bound journal. Jake and Sarah looked uncertain, their eyes fixed on the candlelight trembling in front of them. "It's called the game of 100 candles," Ryan whispered. "One candle, one story. After each story, you blow out a flame, and something listens." Nobody laughed. The first candle was lit. Ryan began. "When I was 9, I saw a woman in white standing by the bridge near our neighborhood. Her eyes were shut. I blinked and she was gone. But in my rear-view mirror, years later, I swear I saw her again, sitting in the back seat of my car." He blew out the first candle. Instantly, the air grew colder. Not a breeze, but a presence. Jake turned toward the corner of the room. "Did anyone just see that curtain move?" The curtain was still. Second candle. Emily's voice shook. She told the story of her younger cousin, admitted to a psychiatric hospital in Milwaukee after he began talking to someone inside the walls. One night, the boy pointed to the security camera in his room and whispered, "He's watching you now." The footage showed a shadow, tall and stiff, standing just behind the boy's bed. But the nurses swore no one had entered. She blew out the candle. From the far end of the hallway came a soft creaking, like an old door slowly shifting. Then, 3 soft knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Jake's hand clenched. That came from the basement. Ryan lit the third candle, his voice steady, but lower now. He talked about driving alone through a snowy mountain road in Colorado. Headlights behind him, getting closer, too close. But when he pulled over, no one passed. No car, no lights, just trees, still and watching. As he blew out the candle, the overhead light flickered, then went out completely. The only light left was from the candles. Their faces glowed orange and afraid. Fourth candle. Fifth, sixth, each story more disturbing. Objects moved. Shadows lingered longer than they should have. The temperature dropped. Not cold, empty. By the 10th candle, Sarah refused to continue. "You don't understand. I don't feel alone anymore." Ryan's face was pale. "We can't stop. Not halfway. If we stop, they stay." "Who's they?" No one replied. Jake lit the 11th candle, but the room had changed. Quieter. Too quiet. Even the ticking of the antique wall clock had stopped. Sarah slowly turned her head toward the dark corner near the fireplace. That's when they saw it. A figure. Motionless. Tall, black, no features. Just glowing red eyes where a face should be. Watching. "Do you see it?" Ryan whispered. Nobody answered. No one could move. Suddenly, the candle in the center snuffed out. Not blown, not melted. Extinguished by something unseen. Then, from under the dining table came the soft sound of a child. Crying. The cry was like a faint whisper echoing from below the floor. They all froze. Emily clutched Sarah's hand, which was beginning to tremble. Jake slowly turned toward the wooden table behind them, where the sound was coming from. "The candle in the middle went out on its own," Ryan muttered. "That's not part of the rules." No one answered. Emily tried to stay calm, opening her journal and writing down what had just happened. But her hands were shaking, and the ink from her pen dripped irregularly. The sound came again. This time it was clearer. A small cry, then the sound of small feet running away. toward the basement. Ryan stood up. "I have to check." "Are you crazy?" Jake whispered sharply. "Didn't you hear that little kid's voice? We're not alone here." "I have to make sure," Ryan replied, grabbing a flashlight from his backpack. He walked slowly toward the basement door in the corner of the room. The door handle was rusty, and it creaked as he opened it. The stairs leading down were dark and narrow. The walls were damp. The paint was peeling. Each step creaked like a scream. Below, the flashlight illuminated a room filled with dust, old boxes, and something moving in the corner. Ryan stopped. The flashlight shone toward an old metal shelf. There was a small teddy bear lying on the floor, but the bear was moving. It was slowly turning on its own, as if touched by something invisible. Ryan took a step back. Then he heard a sound. 3 knocked behind him. He turned quickly. There was nothing there, but the cold air felt like a breath on his neck. Above, the others heard everything. Emily and Sarah sat huddled together. Jake stood near the stairs, calling softly, "Ryan?" There was no answer, only the sound of the old pipes in the ceiling and something running up the stairs. They all stepped back simultaneously as the sound of quick footsteps approached. Suddenly, Ryan reappeared. He was panting. His face was pale. There's a little boy in the corner, but he's not an ordinary child. His eyes are all black. Sarah started crying. The remaining candles began to flicker, their flames trembling violently despite the absence of wind. Emily closed her journal. "We have to stop." Ryan refused. "We've already started. We have to finish. If we stop now, something will stay in this house. Or come home with us." The sound behind them came again. This time it wasn't crying. It was a whisper. One word, said by many voices. Child, adult, old, broken. Continue. The chandelier above their heads moved on its own. A small swing, as if someone were touching it. The 12th candle was lit. Sarah was forced to speak. With a hoarse voice, she told the story of a stranger who had followed her home from the library. She thought she was safe, but that night, she saw the man standing outside her bedroom window. His hands were bleeding, and he knocked on the glass gently, 3 times. But when her father opened the front door, there was no one there, only drops of blood trickling down the stairs. The story was over. Sarah blew out the candle with trembling hands. As the smoke rose to the ceiling, the walls of the house rumbled softly, as if something was waking up. Jake quickly turned toward the wall. The vibration was unusual, not like the usual cracks in an old house, but like a thud from inside, as if something was pushing the wall out. "I want to get out of here now," said Sarah. Her voice was desperate. But the front door, which had been slightly open, was now tightly shut. Ryan tried it, locked. Even when he pulled with all his strength, the door didn't budge. Emily stood up and hugged herself. "I brought a small security camera. We can record everything, just for documentation." At first, she opened her bag and took out a small cube-shaped camera, a new model that could connect directly to a phone. She aimed it at the living room, pressed the record button, then placed it on the bookshelf. "We'll find out later what really happened," she said softly. Ryan lit the 13th candle. This time, he didn't start telling the story right away. "Something's wrong. This game isn't just a story. Something was summoned here," he said, looking at them one by one. "I read it. If the candles go out before their time, it means they're already here." "Hey!" asked Emily. Ryan continued. "Entities from the stories. Sometimes it's not just one. Sometimes it's more than that." He told them about an old case from Arkansas in 1987. A group of students played the same game. They didn't finish it. 2 days later, one of them disappeared. He was found a week later, sitting in his closet, his body trembling and unable to speak for the rest of his life. On the wall, written in blood, "You called, I came." Ryan blew out the 13th candle. At that moment, the small camera beeped softly. Emily grabbed her phone and opened the streaming screen. Her face turned pale. Her eyes widened. We were not alone. The camera showed them sitting in the middle of the circle, as usual. But behind Jake, who wasn't even moving, stood a tall, motionless figure. Black. Its face was invisible. Only a vague shape with its head tilted to the side, as if watching. Sarah screamed. Jake turned quickly. There was nothing behind him. Emily rewound the clip. The figure was still there, but in the next second, it was gone. "It knows we saw it," Emily whispered. The 14th candle was lit. It was Jake's turn, but he was too shaken. Ryan finally took over. He told the story of a Lyft driver who once had a strange passenger, a man in shabby clothes, who didn't speak the entire ride, only laughing softly every time they passed a dark street. At the end of the ride, the man said softly, "Thank you for taking me home." But the destination was the driver's own house. After blowing out the candle, a heavy breath was heard from behind the sofa. Everyone turned around. There was no one there, but a long scratch appeared on the wooden floor, like the mark of a claw. Emily gripped her phone tightly. He's still here. From the kitchen, a plate shattered loudly. They all jumped. Jake took a deep breath. "All right, let's just finish this quickly." But when Ryan lit the 15th candle, the match broke. No flame appeared, only the sound of cracking wood, and a small voice from the darkness. "Don't continue." The voice sounded like a child's whisper, but it was too deep, too clear. It didn't come from the mouth of an ordinary human being. Jake took a step back. "Did you hear that?" Emily nodded. Her face was pale. She was still holding the phone, connected to the camera. But now the signal was interrupted. The screen shook. The image distorted. Black flashes appeared occasionally, like faces or claws. It was hard to tell. Ryan rummaged through the drawers and finally found a lighter. He lit the 15th candle. The flame burned slowly. But this time the color was different. Darker, a dull yellow, as if it were burning from within. Sarah's already crying silently. She sits hugging her knees, her body trembling. Jake sits beside her, not daring to touch her. The walls of the house are getting colder. A gust of air from somewhere makes the candle flame flicker, as if it were afraid. Ryan continues. There's a story about an old house in Ohio. A woman lived there alone. Every night she heard footsteps in the attic, even though the house was only one story. When she finally mustered the courage to climb up and open the roof, she found small footprints and the words, "Follow me," written in the dust. He blew out the 15th candle. The chandelier in the living room suddenly fell and shattered on the floor. Everyone jumped. From behind the bookshelf, a sound echoed, like nails scraping wood. Slow, long scratching, then silence. Emily slowly stood up, approaching the camera that had stopped recording. As she looked toward the bookshelf, her eyes froze. "There's something behind there," she whispered. "What?" Jake asked. Emily didn't answer. She stepped back. Her hands were trembling. Then, from the gap between the bookshelf and the wall, something emerged. A small hand, pale, no nails. It slowly gripped the edge of the bookshelf and stopped. It didn't move, but then eyes appeared, black and empty. No eyelids. Everyone stepped back together. Sarah screamed. The hand disappeared back into the shelf, as if it had entered the wall. "Enough!" Jake shouted. "This isn't a game anymore. We have to get out." But when Ryan tried the front door again, a loud noise echoed from the back of the house. The back door opened on its own. Wind blew in, carrying the scent of iron like blood. Emily slowly stepped toward the open back door. Moonlight reflected off the wet wooden floor. But it wasn't raining. Ryan pulled her back. "Don't. It's a trap." The 16th candle lit itself. No one had touched it. The flame stood straight, unflinching. From outside the house, there was a knocking sound, not at the door, but at the kitchen window. 3 times. Then, in the living room, 3 more times, as if someone was walking around the house, knocking on every window one by one. Emily turned toward the camera, which was starting to light up again. On the screen, there weren't 4 of them. There were 5. Someone was standing behind Sarah. Tall, thin, his head was tilted. His hands were on Sarah's shoulders, but Sarah didn't feel them. "He's behind you," Emily whispered. Sarah turned around. Empty, but her body suddenly tensed. Her eyes were blank, and her lips moved on their own. It's too late. Sarah stood up slowly, her body stiff. Her eyes remained fixed ahead, unblinking, while her lips kept moving, repeating the same words. It's too late, it's too late. Jake tried to approach, but Ryan pulled him back. Don't touch her. But that's not Sarah, Emily whispered. Suddenly, all the candles in the room went out at the same time. Total darkness. Only the small flashlight in Ryan's hand provided a faint glow, slowly sweeping across the room. The air grew heavy, almost impossible to breathe. It felt as though the room was being pressed from the outside or from below. Sarah began walking toward the open back door. Her feet dragged, as if she wasn't fully conscious. Her hands clutched something. Emily's notebook, which had somehow ended up in her hands. Sarah, Emily called, trying to grab the notebook. But when her hand touched Sarah's arm, the girl's body felt cold and hard, like stone. Emily jumped back. She doesn't feel anything, she muttered. Sarah stopped at the doorway. The night wind blew in, carrying a sound like a distant howl from the middle of the forest. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was a long scream twisted into a whisper. Sarah looked up and laughed softly. She's already here, she said softly. Then she dropped the book to the ground and collapsed, motionless. Jake hugged her. Sarah, hey, wake up. Can you hear me? Sarah opened her eyes slowly. Her gaze was empty. But now she was back. I saw him, she whispered. He's standing at the edge of the forest. Tall. It looks like he's calling me. Emily picked up the book from the ground. On the last page, there was new writing. It wasn't anyone's handwriting. The writing was rough, slanted, and in barely legible English. Now you know fear. Now you know me. Ryan lit the 17th candle. His left hand began to bleed, either from broken glass or something clawing at him from inside his pocket. But he didn't care. I'll finish this. He began telling the story of a strange incident in a rental apartment in New Mexico. The previous tenant had disappeared without a trace, but every night, the neighbors heard the sound of door opening and closing, even though the unit was empty. One night, a new tenant recorded the sound coming from behind the wall. The voice said, I never left. You're the one who came. The candle was blown out. From the attic, there was the sound of metal clinking, repeatedly, like a chain being dragged. Jake tried to call the police, but there was no signal. Even the clock on his phone had stopped. The digital numbers were frozen at 3:06. Emily opened the first page of her book. All the previous writing had disappeared. The book was blank, except for one sentence that now appeared right in the middle of the page. Chapter 1 is finished. Now it's your turn to be the story. Ryan looked up, staring at the room that now felt smaller. The walls seemed to be closing in. Sarah was still lying on the floor, shivering, and from beneath the wooden floor, the sound of slow footsteps could be heard, rising, approaching, waiting. Footsteps from below the floor grew louder, slow, heavy, like something that shouldn't have feet, trying to become human. Ryan shone his flashlight on the floor, but the light only revealed dust swirling slowly. No cracks, no gaps, but the sound continued to rise, as if coming from a space that wasn't real. Jake hugged Sarah, who was still trembling. Emily stood beside Ryan, staring at his book, which was now writing itself. Page after page was filled with terrifying sentences. They sat in the middle of the circle, hoping to escape, but everything had been sealed since they said my name. One by one, they will speak. One by one, they will hear their own voices from a place that should be empty. Emily quickly closed the book. He's writing our story now. Ryan looked around. We have to finish the ritual. Keep lighting and blowing out the candles. If we stop now, the 18th candle, Emily whispered, taking another one and placing it in the center of the circle. Ryan lit the flame. This time, Jake spoke up. His voice was low. A few months ago, I was working the night shift at a gas station. At 2 a.m, a black sedan pulled up. The driver didn't get out, but the light stayed on. After 20 minutes, I went out to check. The car was empty, but the engine was still running. And on the back window, there was a message written from inside. Don't look back. He blew out the 18th candle. The flame went out, but this time there was no sound, no vibration, complete silence. They waited. Second by second passed. Then, from the hallway leading to the back room, a sound was heard. A recording, like a voice from a broken tape. Slow, crackling, and it was Jake's voice, telling the story he had just heard, word for word, but with a tone as if he were being tortured. Jake turned toward the hallway. That's my voice. Ryan quickly lit the 19th candle. Emily speaks now. She tells the story of an old woman who kept a small wooden doll in her box. The doll had belonged to her mother, and her mother always said, "If you speak too loudly, she will hear you." One night, the woman screamed in her sleep. The next day, she was found sitting on the floor, her tongue missing. The doll was in her lap, smiling. Emily blew out the 19th candle. The back door opened on its own. Inside, an old rocking chair was moving slowly. Ryan lit the 20th candle. Before anyone could speak, Emily's book opened on its own. The pages turned quickly, then stopped. Black ink appeared, writing a new sentence at an unseen speed. The next chapter will begin with blood. They all looked at each other. Ryan tried to speak, but his hands were bleeding, more heavily than before. The blood fell to the floor, directly beneath the newly lit candle. The flame flickered. Then it grew larger for a moment, as if doused in oil, before settling back down. Jake looked toward the window. Outside, someone stood, tall, silent. Their face was hidden in shadow, but their eyes, two bright white dots, stared into the house, straight at them. He's already outside. Emily clutched her book tightly. Sarah, her voice hoarse, said, "It's not just one. They're all here." And from the attic, the basement, the hallway, the windows, the same sound came. 5 knocks, simultaneously, as if the house itself had come to life, and was waiting for the end of the story they had started themselves. The 5 knocks echoed from every direction, not loud, but deep, like the sound of a chest being tapped from within. The house was breathing. Ryan stood up slowly, looking around. We're inside now, not just physically. We're inside the story. "Look," Emily exclaimed, pointing to window. The figure standing outside was no longer alone. There were more. Tall, slender silhouettes stood in a row, surrounding the house. Some faced the window, others stood with their backs turned, as if waiting for their turn. There were no faces, only shadows with heads tilted slowly, unnaturally. Jake began lighting the 21st candle, but the lighter in Ryan's hand caught fire on its own. The flame shot up to the ceiling, creating a sharp hissing sound before dying out in an instant. From the back room, there was the sound of creaking floors, like someone walking slowly, then stopping. Sarah gripped Jake's hand. Emily opened her notebook again. A new page appeared. This time, it wasn't writing. It was a drawing, roughly sketched in black ink. 4 figures sitting in a circle, surrounded by shadows. Behind one of them, there was a tall creature with its mouth wide open. "That's us," Emily whispered. "And that's the one behind me." She turned slowly to look behind her. There was nothing there, but the coldness was different, not like the usual night air. The cold felt like rotten flesh touched by fingers. Ryan lit the 21st candle with a new match. The flame flickered slowly, as if resisting its own will. It was Sarah's turn. Her voice was still hoarse. "When I was little, I once disappeared for 2 hours in the park. Everyone panicked, but I felt like I was just sitting on the swing. And across from me, there was someone small, without a face. He said, 'If you tell anyone, I'll come with you home.' Since then, every time I'm alone, I can feel him standing behind me. Now he's back." She blew out the candle. Ryan's flashlight began to dim, even though the battery was full. Jake checked his phone. The time had changed. 3:06, the same as before. Unmoving. I feel like I'm stuck in this time, Jake whispered. Emily stared at her phone screen, showing the camera in the front room. On the screen, they weren't sitting anymore. Their 4 bodies were visible, standing in a circle around the candles, each facing outward. But in the real world, they were still sitting. On the screen, we're standing, Emily said softly. Ryan approached the screen. His body in the video turned toward the camera, straight toward them, then smiled. Jake pulled his phone and threw it to the floor. The screen shattered, but from the broken speaker, a recorded voice could be heard. 22 candles. It's time to write the end. They all turned, and in the center of the circle of candles, there was now a pen, one they had never brought with them. The pen moved on its own, writing on the empty wooden floor. One of them will be left behind. One of them will become the door. Ryan stood up. He began lighting the 22nd candle, but his hand caught fire. The flames shot up high and formed a face for a moment, then died out. Someone or something wouldn't let him continue, and from the attic, a scream echoed, not one, but many, merging together, like people who hadn't been able to speak for a long time, finally able to scream again. The screams went on for a long time, long layered, the voices of women, children, men. All the screams came from the attic, but sounded as if they were coming from the walls of the house itself. Sarah covered her ears. Jake crouched down, his face buried in fear. Ryan stood stiffly, his hands still bearing the red scars of burns. Emily clutched her book as if her life depended on it. I can't take it anymore, Jake whispered. We have to get out. There's no way out, Emily whispered. We're not in the house anymore. We're somewhere else. This story has swallowed us. Ryan forced himself to light the 22nd candle with a new lighter. The flame ignited, but this time there was a sound like someone's breath very close. Too close. Sarah trembled. Just now, someone whispered in my ear. What did it say? Ryan asked. She swallowed hard, then answered. It said, "Thank you for opening the door." The back door swung open wide. Inside, it was pitch black, darker than dark, like there was no end. Emily slowly walked toward the bookshelf. She was looking for something. What are you looking for? Jake asked. Emily answered without turning around. In the original legend of this game, if you want to get out, you have to return the story. It has to be written, but not by you. She lifted a torn piece of paper from between the pages of an old book on the shelf. Written in dried ink, I write you here. You write, I am free. We're not players anymore, Emily said softly. We're replacements. Meanwhile, Ryan began telling a new story. With a choked voice, he described a recurring nightmare he had been experiencing for years. In his dream, he stood on an empty street, unable to move, and from the distance, someone was walking toward him, but never reached him, just kept walking forever. Tonight, he said, the dream felt real, and when he looked toward the window earlier, that person was almost there. He blew out the 22nd candle. The kitchen light came on, but not like usual. It flickered rapidly, and in the middle of the flickering, the silhouette of a person appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared closer and closer. Jake screamed and turned away. Sarah closed her eyes. Emily froze, and in the last blink, the figure was in the middle of the room, but there was no one there. Only the wind coming from all directions. Strong, turning pages, blowing out the flames, extinguishing all the candles in one breath. The room was pitch black. Don't panic, Ryan shouted. We can still. The sound of Emily's book opening on its own. The last page now read. The final chapter will be written with loss. Suddenly, Sarah was gone. Jake turned. Sarah? Everyone looked at where Sarah had been sitting. Empty. No sound. No shadow. Only the air felt extremely cold, and small footprints leading toward the back door. Jake ran toward it, shouting, Sarah! But the hallway now seemed to stretch endlessly. The light from behind couldn't reach inside. And from beyond the hallway, the sound of a child singing a song, softly, flatly, without emotion. Emily stared at her book. On the last blank page, new words appeared slowly. The door is open. One is left behind. 2 will write. 1 will return. Jake stood at the entrance of the hallway. His lips trembled. "She's not gone anywhere," he whispered. "She's still here." And as he stepped into the hallway, the door to the room closed on its own, slowly, then locked. The bedroom door was tightly shut. Jake disappeared along with Sarah's voice, which now sounded like a distant murmur at the end of the dark hallway. Ryan ran, trying to open the door handle, but the lock had changed shape. It wasn't ordinary metal. It was like petrified bone, cold and sharp. "He can still hear us," Ryan shouted. Emily approached, holding her book, which had opened on its own. "Don't force your way in. That's not a room anymore." Ryan glared at her. "What do you mean?" Emily pointed to a new page written in fresh ink. It wasn't Jake who entered the hallway. He's the one who wrote the last chapter. Outside the house, shadowy figures began to move. They were no longer still. Some pressed their faces against the windows. Some tapped gently, repeatedly. 3 taps. Silence. 3 more. The same rhythm as before. Ryan turned to face the circle of candles, which were almost extinguished. Only 3 small flames remained. "I'll finish it," he said firmly. He lit the 23rd candle. This story comes from his childhood. It was about a night when the power went out in the old house where he lived. His mother told him to go to sleep, but when he opened his eyes, someone was sitting at the end of his bed. He thought it was his mother, but the figure didn't move all night. It just sat there, facing the wall. When morning came and the lights came on, his bed was empty, but the imprint of the body that had been sitting there was still there, and on the wall was written, "I like you when you're quiet." Emily blew out the candles. The flames died slowly, as if reluctant to go. "I hear them," she whispered. "They're not just outside. They're among us." Ryan raised a flashlight. The light flickered. In a brief flash, he saw another shadow standing directly behind Emily. Its hands hung low. Its head was bowed. The second flash, the shadow vanished. "Emily, don't move." But it was too late. Her neck began to turn blue, as if being choked by something invisible. She felt the floor, thrashing. Ryan dragged her body to the center of the circle and lit the 24th candle. His hands trembling, his voice shaking, he spoke as quickly as he could about the emails from an unknown address that he had been receiving for a week. They contained only one sentence: "You will sit in my place." Every night, the email arrived at exactly 3:06 a.m. He ignored them until one night, he turned on the webcam and saw someone sitting behind him in the chair that should have been empty. Ryan blew out the 24 candles. A heavy breathing sound came from the ceiling. Emily coughed hard, but she sat back down, the book in her hands open again. The next page was blank, but the walls of the house began to write themselves. Yes, the walls. On the wooden board, a new sentence appeared as if written by invisible fingers. "One last candle. One last story. One soul for the door." Ryan turned around. Only one candle remained. He lit it, but a voice from the hallway spoke first. "Let me tell the story," said Jake's voice. The bedroom door slowly opened on its own. At the threshold stood Jake, but it wasn't the same Jake who had entered earlier. His body was the same. His clothes were the same, but his eyes were completely black. His smile didn't move. It was too wide, too calm. "I know the end of the story." Emily stood up slowly, staring at him, trembling. "We have to blow out the last candle," she said. Ryan looked at Jake, or whatever was now in Jake's form. "We blow together," Ryan whispered. Jake bowed his head. "All right, but don't blame me if the door doesn't close." The 25th candle burned with the calmest flame of all. It didn't flicker. It didn't blink. Just a steady, silent light, as if it knew this was the end. Jake, or whatever was wearing his face, stood in the doorway. His body looked normal, but the air around him was condensing. Even the dust that usually floated in the air now fell to the floor, as if the gravity around it had changed. Emily and Ryan stood beside the candles. Emily still held her book, which was now slowly burning at the edges. but it did not burn to ashes. The pages turned to ash, then returned to their original state, then burned again. It was as if time did not exist within those pages. "I'll tell you," Ryan whispered, the last human voice in the room. He looked toward Jake, then bowed his head toward the small flame in the center. "A few nights ago, I had a dream. In the dream, I was sitting in this house, just like now, but everything was upside down. The chairs faced the walls. The windows looked inward, and the candles weren't lit by fire, but by shadows." Jake smiled softly. His eyes remained black. "In the dream, I saw all of us, sitting here, and someone was standing outside the circle. Not a shadow, not a creature, but myself, standing, staring at all of us, waiting." Emily closed her eyes. She knew the story wasn't just a dream. It was part of them, part of the game. "I realize," Ryan continued, "that this story isn't about something coming from outside, but about something that's always been inside." He blew out the candles, and the room went empty. Instantly, all sounds vanished. The wind stopped. The shadows disappeared. The windows were illuminated by moonlight. Ryan stood alone. There was no Emily. There was no Jake. No bedroom door was open. Only he, the burnt candle circle, and the neatly closed notebook in the middle of the room. He stepped forward slowly and opened it. The first page was blank. The second page was blank. All the pages were blank, except for the last page. There, written in red ink that hadn't dried yet, was a single sentence. "Thank you. Now it's your turn to guard the door." Ryan couldn't speak. From beneath the floor, the first breath was heard, slowly, deeply, and the front door opened on its own. The wind blew in, and someone from outside stepped inside. The house is now silent. There is no light. There is no sound. Only the smell of burnt candles and breath that has not yet stopped. The book is still lying there. The last page remains open, waiting for a new name to be written. And the candle, the last candle, still holds a shadow that has not yet faded. Because this story has not truly ended. He is just silent, waiting for your turn.